My daughter yelled, "You're just a walking ATM." Hours later, she begged me to save her from foreclosure. The clinking of silverware against fine porcelain was the only sound breaking the tense silence that had descended upon Alara's elegant dining room. Outside, the twilight deepened, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured garden, a verdant sanctuary meticulously tended yet rarely truly enjoyed by its owner. Inside, the air crackled with an unspoken animosity, thick enough to choke on, a familiar phantom limb of discomfort that Alara had learned to carry with a serene, almost imperceptible grace. Alara, her silver hair impeccably styled, each strand a testament to her lifelong dedication to order and appearance, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table. Her posture was erect, her hands clasped loosely in her lap, a serene mask carefully constructed over years of quiet suffering, a bulwark against the rising tide of her family's indifference. Across from her, Lyra, her daughter, fiddled restlessly with a diamond bracelet that glittered ostentatiously, catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. Her eyes, usually so sharp and self-assured, darted between her mother and her untouched plate, a flicker of agitation playing beneath their surface. Silas, Alara's son, sat to Lyra's left, seemingly miles away, engrossed in his phone, his thumbs moving with practiced ease across the screen. He occasionally grunted in response to some unseen message, his world confined to the glowing rectangle in his hands. Willow, Lyra's daughter, was barely present, her attention fixated on a show playing on her tablet, earbuds firmly in place, a digital barrier insulating her from the storm brewing around her. The familiar tableau, etched into Alara's memory from countless dinners past, played out once more. Alara had tried to broach the subject gently, as she always did, a delicate dance of concern cloaked in casual conversation, a desperate hope that this time, just this once, her words might land softly, might penetrate the thick walls of their self-absorption. She cleared her throat, the small sound barely audible above the faint hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen. "Lyra, dear," she had begun, her voice a soft murmur, carefully modulated to convey gentle inquiry rather than accusation, "I've been looking at some of your recent expenditures. The new boutique you mentioned, the designer bags, perhaps it would be wise to consider a more sustainable approach to your finances. The market has been quite volatile lately, and Alara simply worried." A mother's worry, a deep, persistent ache that had accompanied her for decades, a burden she alone seemed to carry. It was a familiar refrain, a gentle prod that had always been met with dismissive waves, hollow promises, or, worse, feigned ignorance. But tonight, something snapped. Perhaps it was the sheer audacity of Lyra's latest spending spree, a whispered report from Mr. Albright that morning about a truly astronomical sum transferred for a bag Alara knew cost more than a small car. Or perhaps it was the profound exhaustion that had finally settled deep within Alara's bones, an accumulation of years of quiet, unacknowledged sacrifice. Lyra's head shot up, her eyes blazing with an indignation born of privilege and a complete, almost breathtaking, lack of self-awareness. Her face, usually carefully composed, a mask of curated perfection, twisted into an ugly sneer, every line betraying the carefully constructed facade. "Worry?" she spat, her voice rising with each word, gaining an unpleasant shrillness. The delicate clinking of her diamond bracelet, once a subtle accompaniment, suddenly became jarringly loud, almost violent. "You worry? What is there to worry about, mother? You've always taken care of everything. What's another designer bag to you? Another zero on your bank account balance?" Her voice escalated further, shrill and piercing, cutting through the carefully curated peace of the room, shattering it like fragile glass. Silas finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of irritation, not concern, in his eyes. He seemed annoyed at the disruption to his digital world rather than the burgeoning conflict. Willow, startled by the sudden shift in volume, pulled out an earbud, her young face a mixture of curiosity, then a familiar disdain, as if this was merely another tiresome domestic drama. "You're just a walking ATM, mother." Lyra shrieked, her words echoing off the high ceilings, each syllable a hammer blow to Alara's soul, resonating with a venomous truth that had long been unspoken but always felt. That's all you've ever been useful for. The insult hung in the air, a venomous cloud, suffocating and potent. Elara flinched, not physically, for her composure was legendary, but deep within, where hope resided, a fragile, trembling thing she had nurtured through years of neglect. A hope that one day, her children would see her, truly see her, not as a means to an end, but as a person, a mother who loved them beyond measure. Silas and Willow remained silent, their gazes fixed, unblinking, their lack of protest a silent, chilling endorsement of Lyra's cruelty. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic hammering of Elara's shattered heart, a sound she felt in her very bones. She looked at her children, the two beings she had devoted her life and fortune to, the very purpose she had embraced after Richard's death, and saw only contempt, entitlement, and a horrifying void where gratitude should have been. Her face remained impassive, a testament to decades of practice, betraying none of the seismic shift occurring within her. A cold, steely resolve, born of years of quiet pain and profound disappointment, began to crystallize in her chest, replacing the familiar ache of heartbreak. It was done. The last fragile thread of genuine affection, the one she had desperately clung to, the hope she had refused to relinquish even as it frayed, had finally, irrevocably, snapped. A sense of profound clarity, chilling in its starkness, washed over her. Within hours of the confrontation, the silent house bore witness to Elara's transformation. The veneer of gentle sorrow, the soft resignation she had worn for so long, had been shed, replaced by an unnerving calmness, a quiet, almost dangerous determination. Her fingers, steady and precise, punched numbers into her phone. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Her long-trusted financial advisor, Mr. Albright, answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar, a comforting presence she had relied on for years, a man who knew the intricate labyrinth of her finances better than anyone. Mr. Albright, Elara began, her voice devoid of emotion, each word carefully articulated, I need to make some significant changes, effective immediately. I want all financial support to Lyra and Silas frozen. That includes their home mortgage payments, their luxury car leases, and Willow's university allowance. Every single cent. Elara wanted it all stopped. And she wanted it done within the next 24 hours. Mr. Albright, accustomed to Elara's meticulous financial management and her unwavering resolve in business matters, but rarely such drastic personal measures, paused, a hint of surprise, perhaps even a touch of concern, in his voice. Mrs. Beaumont, are you certain? This is quite comprehensive. He knew the extent of her children's dependency, the vast sums she had quietly funneled into their lives for years. Elara's voice hardened, gaining a metallic edge that conveyed absolute finality. Absolutely certain, Mr. Albright. And Elara will also be contacting her estate lawyer to revise her will. They will be removed entirely. The line went silent for a moment before Mr. Albright, recognizing the unwavering resolve in her tone, the sheer unbreakability of her decision, simply stated, understood, Mrs. Beaumont. I'll begin immediately. He had seen this look in her eyes before, in the rare instances when she made a truly irrevocable business decision, a look that brooked no argument, no appeal. Next, she called Mr. Harrison, her estate lawyer, a man equally discreet and efficient, who received similar, equally firm instructions. The conversation was brief, to the point, a stark contrast to the lengthy, often emotionally charged discussions she had endured with her children. The vault, as Lyra had so crudely put it, was not only closing, it was locking its impenetrable doors for good, sealed with the unwavering conviction of a woman who had finally reached her limit. Elara hung up the phone, a profound sense of liberation washing over her, light and pure. The burden she had carried for decades, the invisible chains of obligation and unreciprocated love, the crushing weight of their expectations, had finally fallen away. She felt lighter, clearer, as if a perpetual fog had lifted from her mind, revealing a landscape she hadn't truly seen in years. The silence in the house, once oppressive in its emptiness, was no longer a symbol of her loneliness, it was peaceful, promising, a sanctuary. This sudden, drastic action was not an impulsive outburst, a fit of pique born of a single insult. It was the culmination of decades of quiet sacrifice and unacknowledged pain, a slow, agonizing erosion of her spirit. When Alara's beloved husband, Richard, had passed away 15 years ago, leaving a void that had never truly filled, he had also left her a substantial fortune, a legacy built on shrewd investments and a lifetime of diligent, often grueling, work. He had entrusted it to her, not just for her comfort, but with the quiet understanding that she would use it to secure their children's futures, to ensure they never knew hardship. He had envisioned a supportive foundation, a springboard for their success. And Alara, ever dutiful, ever loyal to his memory, had done exactly that, to the detriment of her own peace, her own desires, her own dwindling reserves of joy. She had interpreted his wishes as an absolute mandate, a sacred trust that meant placing her children's every whim above her own well-being. She had paid for Lyra's sprawling suburban mansion, a 5-bedroom monstrosity with a swimming pool and a 3-car garage, a house far too grand for a family of 3 and certainly beyond Lyra's means. Alara had put down a staggering sum as a down payment, remembering Lyra's tearful pleas about needing space and wanting the best for Willow. Then, Alara quietly covered the monthly mortgage payments when Lyra's fickle boutique business inevitably faltered, as Alara had always known it would. Lyra's boutique was more a hobby than a business, a vanity project born of a fleeting interest in fashion and a desire for social cachet that consistently bled money, requiring constant infusions from Alara's accounts. Alara often overheard Lyra telling friends that the boutique was thriving, a lie that twisted Alara's stomach. Every year, Alara found herself discreetly covering Lyra's ever-increasing credit card debts, which were often racked up on frivolous purchases, designer clothes, exotic holidays that lasted weeks, extravagant parties that Lyra hosted to maintain her image among her equally entitled friends, people who valued superficiality above all else. Alara remembered the time Lyra had demanded a new luxury SUV because her current one, less than 2 years old, was so last season, its sleek lines no longer satisfying Lyra's fleeting desire for novelty. Alara had sighed, a deep, silent exhalation of weariness, then written the check, silencing Lyra's pouting with financial appeasement, a tactic she had perfected over years. She recalled Lyra's casual dismissal of her own attempts to suggest a more prudent approach. "Oh, mother, you just don't understand the market," Lyra would say, waving a manicured hand, as if Alara, the meticulous manager of a multi-million-dollar estate, lacked financial acumen. Silas was no better, perhaps even more infuriating in his blissful ignorance. A self-proclaimed entrepreneur, who dabbled in various dubious ventures that never quite materialized, each one requiring a substantial seed investment from Alara, he lived in a lavish apartment in the city, the rent for which Alara had been paying for the past 7 years. His ventures ranged from a failed artisanal coffee subscription service to a cryptocurrency scheme that vanished overnight, leaving only a trail of Alara's funds in its wake. He drove a sleek, high-end sports car, leased and maintained by Alara, its roaring engine a constant, noisy reminder of his dependence. His lifestyle of expensive restaurants, exclusive clubs, and high-stakes poker games was entirely subsidized by his mother, a fact he seemed to take for granted. Alara had once gently suggested Silas consider a more stable career path, perhaps in finance, given his purported interest in investments, hoping to nudge him towards self-sufficiency. He had laughed, a dismissive, arrogant sound that grated on her nerves. "Why would I work, mother, when I have you?" he had quipped, oblivious to the knife twisting in her gut, the raw wound of his ingratitude. He had a penchant for expensive gadgets, always the latest iPhone, the newest gaming console, the most cutting-edge smart home devices, and Alara had learned not to question the exorbitant amounts he occasionally requested for business opportunities that never yielded any returns, only demands for more. She had even covered the legal fees for a minor incident involving a bar fight, a humiliation she still carried, the memory of the police station and the public shame a bitter taste in her mouth. And then there was Willow, her granddaughter, Lyra's daughter. Elara adored Willow, a bright, intelligent girl, but even that affection was tainted by the financial demands, the relentless expectation that Elara's wealth was Willow's inherent right. Willow's exorbitant university allowance, as Elara had called it, was actually far more than an allowance. It covered not only her tuition at a prestigious private university but also her luxury apartment near campus, her designer wardrobe filled with clothes that cost more than Elara's monthly grocery bill, her international travel during breaks, and a monthly stipend that exceeded the average person's salary. Elara had once seen Willow's bank statement, a shock of endless withdrawals for high-end restaurants, exclusive events, and luxury goods, a mirror image of her mother's spending habits. Willow had even once complained to Elara that her current European vacation was boring because her mother hadn't transferred enough money for a private jet to take her between cities, a statement of breathtaking entitlement. Elara had bitten back the sharp retort, the words of frustration burning on her tongue, knowing it would fall on deaf ears, that Willow, like her mother, had been too insulated by wealth to understand. The children and grandchild had grown up believing Elara's wealth was an endless, bottomless well, their birthright, and her sole purpose in life. They saw her not as a loving mother or grandmother, a woman with her own desires and dreams, but as a financial utility, a resource to be tapped at will, a human ATM. Elara remembered countless family dinners, not unlike the one that had just transpired, where she would listen, in quiet agony, as Lyra and Silas complained about petty inconveniences, trivial matters that seemed monumental to them. They never offered to help each other, never offered to help her, always expecting Elara to solve their problems with a check, a swift transfer of funds. She recalled Lyra's dismissive tone when Elara once expressed a desire to travel more, to explore her own interests, to finally see the world Richard had always promised they would explore together. "Oh, mother, you have plenty of time for that later," Lyra had said, waving her hand dismissively, her eyes already glazing over with boredom. "Right now, Willow really needs that summer program in Switzerland, and it's quite pricey." It was always about them, their wants, their needs, their comfort, their self-importance. Elara had swallowed her disappointment, again and again, the bitter taste becoming increasingly familiar. Each time, a piece of her receded, a little more of her spirit dulled by their relentless consumption and profound lack of empathy. Her own life, her own passions, had been slowly, irrevocably, subsumed by their demands, until she felt like a hollow vessel, existing only to provide. The following morning, Elara awoke with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years, a profound tranquility that settled deep within her. The air felt lighter, the silence companionable, no longer a heavy cloak of expectation. She made herself a cup of tea, a rare, unhurried ritual, and sat in her sun-drenched conservatory, surrounded by the lush greenery she tended with loving care. It was a moment of genuine tranquility, unburdened by the usual anxieties that clung to her like shadows. Meanwhile, across the city, the carefully constructed, financially unstable world of Lyra and Silas began its rapid, painful crumble. Lyra was the first to experience the shock. She stood at the checkout of a high-end boutique, a new handbag and a matching pair of shoes clutched in her hands, her heart soaring with the thrill of the purchase. The assistant smiled expectantly, her eyes appraising Lyra's expensive attire. Lyra handed over her credit card, a platinum card that had always sailed through transactions with effortless ease, funded by her mother's boundless generosity. The machine beeped angrily, a harsh, unexpected sound. "Declined," the assistant said, a hint of disdain creeping into her voice as she tried again, her smile vanishing, only to be met with the same cold rejection. Lyra scoffed, a nervous laugh escaping her, sure it was a momentary glitch, an inconvenience she would swiftly overcome. "Try it again, it must be an error," she insisted, her voice tight with a growing unease. 3 attempts later, the assistant shrugged, her eyes now openly contemptuous. "I'm afraid it's definitely declined, ma'am." Lyra's face flushed crimson, a wave of heat washing over her. She snatched the card back, muttering about a system error, and hastily left the store, her carefully crafted image of effortless wealth suddenly, publicly, shattered, leaving her exposed and humiliated. The weight of the empty handbag in her hands suddenly felt crushing. Later that afternoon, a call from Lyra's mortgage company left her reeling. "Mrs. Henderson," the stern voice on the other end said, devoid of sympathy, "we regret to inform you that your last 2 mortgage payments have not been received. Your account is now severely delinquent, and if payment is not received within 72 hours, we will be forced to initiate foreclosure proceedings." Lyra spluttered, her voice rising in a panicked crescendo, "What? But my mother always pays it. There must be a mistake." She pictured Alara's meticulous records, her unwavering reliability. The representative was unmoved, a robot reciting policy. "Our records show no payment from Mrs. Beaumont for the last 2 months. You are the account holder, and the responsibility falls to you." Lyra slammed the phone down, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a cold dread seeping into her very bones. The walls of her opulent mansion, once a symbol of her status, now felt like they were closing in. Silas's rude awakening came via a text message, an impersonal digital harbinger of doom, from his luxury car dealership: "Your lease payment is overdue. Vehicle tracking enabled. Repossession pending if payment not received immediately." He stared at the message, a cold dread seeping into his bones. His mother always handled the car payments, always. He tried to dismiss it, a mere oversight, but a tremor of fear shook him. He tried to pay for his lavish dinner at an exclusive restaurant later that evening, inviting a new potential investor he hoped to impress, only to have his card declined, just like Lyra's. The waiter's polite but firm voice, the knowing glances from other diners, the humiliation of it all. He had to call a friend to cover the bill, an indignity he hadn't experienced since his early 20s, a time he had painstakingly tried to erase from his memory. The calls from creditors began to trickle in, then flood: the gym membership he rarely used, the private club fees, his exorbitant phone bill, all the services Alara had quietly maintained for years, silently insulating him from the true cost of his lifestyle. His carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of borrowed wealth, was beginning to crack. The most shocking blow, however, landed on Lyra's doorstep in the form of a frantic, tearful call from Willow, her voice high-pitched with entitled panic. "Mom! My university just called. They said my tuition hasn't been paid for this semester, and my apartment rent is due, and they're threatening to kick me out. Grandma always pays for everything. What's going on?" Willow's wails echoed through the phone, full of a raw, desperate fear that was almost childlike in its intensity. Lyra, already on the brink of hysteria, felt a wave of nausea wash over her. It wasn't just her world crumbling, it was Willow's, too. And more importantly, her own carefully cultivated image of a successful, well-connected mother, someone who provided effortlessly for her daughter, was dissolving before her eyes. The shame of Willow's public humiliation, the potential damage to their social standing, far outweighed any genuine concern for Willow's well-being. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seized Lyra and Silas. Their carefully constructed, financially unstable worlds were crumbling with terrifying speed, a dizzying descent from luxury to potential destitution. They called Alara, repeatedly, their fingers flying across their phones, but her phone went straight to voicemail. She had, with a quiet smile of profound satisfaction, activated the "Do Not Disturb" feature for all their numbers, a small, yet significant, act of reclaiming her peace. They texted, then emailed, their messages escalating from irritated queries to urgent demands, then desperate pleas, each one more frantic than the last. Finally, driven by sheer terror, a primal fear of the unknown, they decided to descend upon Alara's house, convinced that a direct confrontation, a display of their combined distress, their desperate plight, would surely break her resolve, would force her back into her familiar role as their savior. The grand, imposing gates of Alara's estate stood shut, a formidable barrier. Lyra honked her horn, long and sustained, a desperate plea. Silas pounded on the intercom, his frustration mounting with each unanswered buzz. After several tense minutes, minutes that felt like an eternity, the gates slowly, silently, swung open, an eerie, almost theatrical gesture. They drove up the long, winding driveway, their anxiety mounting with every foot, the vastness of the estate seeming to mock their predicament. Ilara's house stood serene and unyielding, a fortress of calm, its elegant facade betraying none of the turmoil within its former inhabitants. They burst through the front door, which Ilara had deliberately left unlocked, a silent invitation, a gesture of quiet defiance, their faces contorted with a mixture of fear, rage, and bewildered entitlement. "Mother!" Lyra shrieked, her voice hoarse, ragged from emotion. "What is the meaning of this? Our cards are declined. The mortgage company is threatening foreclosure. Willow is about to be kicked out of university. Have you lost your mind?" Silas, usually calmer, more composed, was equally frantic, his carefully cultivated detachment shattered. "Our cars, Mother. They're threatening to repossess them. What are we supposed to do?" He gestured wildly, his hands shaking. Ilara was seated in her drawing room, a serene oasis of calm, sipping tea from a delicate porcelain cup, a book resting open on her lap, its pages a world away from the chaos she had just unleashed. She looked up, her expression placid, almost amused, a subtle curve of her lips that hinted at a deeper satisfaction. Her eyes, however, held a chilling clarity, a steely gaze that saw through their theatrics. "Ah, there you are," she said, her voice soft, dangerously calm, each syllable perfectly enunciated. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." "Wondering?" Lyra screeched, advancing towards her mother, her hands clenched into fists, her body trembling with unbridled fury. "We are on the verge of financial ruin, and you're wondering. This isn't a game, Mother. This is our lives." She felt the weight of her future, her social standing, collapsing around her. Ilara set her teacup down with a delicate clink, the sound resonating with an almost symbolic finality. "Precisely, Lyra. It is your lives. And it's time you started living them yourselves." She paused, letting her words sink in, allowing them to hang in the air, potent and undeniable. "For decades, Ilara has been your personal bank. Your walking ATM, as you so eloquently put it the other night. And for decades, Ilara watched as you squandered her generosity, never offering a word of thanks, never showing an ounce of respect. You saw her as a resource, not a mother, not a person with feelings, with dreams, with sacrifices." Silas stepped forward, his face a mask of wounded indignation, a pathetic attempt to regain some shred of moral high ground. "That's not fair, Mother. We appreciate everything you've done. We assumed you'd always be there for us." His voice was a whine, laced with a plea that Ilara found utterly repugnant. Ilara's gaze was unwavering, piercing, stripping away their flimsy excuses. "You assumed. That is the core of the problem, Silas. You assumed my love was an endless well of money, not an emotion to be nurtured, to be reciprocated. You assumed your comfort was my sole purpose, that my existence revolved entirely around your whims. Do you know how many times Ilara wanted to travel, to pursue her own hobbies, to simply enjoy a quiet afternoon, only to put them aside because one of you needed a new car, a larger house, another bailout? Do you remember Lyra's boutique that never made a profit, merely consumed funds? Or your countless business ventures, Silas, that vanished into thin air, leaving only my money behind? Do you recall Lyra demanding that new SUV, the one she deemed so last season, within months, or Silas's legal fees for that bar brawl, the public humiliation of it all? Or Willow's private jet complaints, her expectation of boundless luxury? Her voice remained calm, almost conversational, yet each word landed like a precise, devastating blow, designed to penetrate their thick skins, to force them to confront the truth. You have taken, and taken, and taken, with an insatiable appetite. And the moment Ilara dared to offer a word of gentle advice, a hint of concern for your financial recklessness, she was publicly humiliated, called an ATM, children. A machine. That was the breaking point. That was the moment Alara realized you truly saw her as nothing more than a source of funds, an inanimate object devoid of feelings. A mother, a human being, reduced to a dispensing machine. Alara's voice hardened, the metallic edge returning. And an ATM, once empty, or once its owners decide to close it, serves no further purpose. Lyra burst into tears, switching tactics instantly, her face crumpling into a mask of contrived sorrow. Mother, please. You can't do this to us. We'll be ruined. Our house, our cars. Willow's education. Think of Willow. Do you want your granddaughter to suffer? Her voice was laced with a desperate, manipulative plea, designed to tug at the old heartstrings, to exploit the one weakness she believed Alara still possessed. Alara's eyes, however, were devoid of the familiar flicker of sympathy, the slightest hint of wavering. Willow's education, Lyra, is not Alara's responsibility. It is yours. And she will learn a valuable lesson about self-reliance, something you both seem to have assiduously avoided your entire lives. As for being ruined, you are not ruined. You are simply facing the natural consequences of living beyond your means, consequences that Alara has shielded you from for far too long, enabling your destructive patterns. Silas tried a different angle, a hint of veiled threat in his tone, a last desperate attempt to exert control. Mother, this is extreme. People will talk. What will our friends say? What will society think of you, abandoning your own children? His voice dripped with thinly veiled social blackmail. Alara merely smiled, a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that spoke of absolute victory. Let them talk, Silas. Let them wonder. Alara's peace of mind is worth far more than the fleeting opinions of a society that values appearances over substance. Her conscience is clear. She has given you everything, and you have given her nothing but disrespect and a sense of profound exhaustion, a constant drain on her spirit. She stood up, her posture regal, her gaze sweeping over their panicked faces, their fear-filled eyes. Alara's decision is final. The vault is closed. For good. You will need to find your own way now. She suggests you start by understanding the true value of hard work, the profound importance of respect, and the quiet dignity of gratitude. Lyra and Silas stared at her, their faces pale, etched with shock, the truth of her words finally, undeniably, sinking in, cold and heavy. The Alara they knew, the endlessly giving, perpetually forgiving ATM, was gone. In her place was a woman of iron will, a stranger, formidable and unyielding. They had come to beg, to manipulate, to threaten, to demand, but they found no weakness, no crack in her resolve. They were met with an unyielding wall of self-possession, a woman who had finally chosen herself. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Lyra's choked sobs, raw and unfiltered. Defeated, utterly bewildered by this seismic shift in their universe, they turned and stumbled out of the house, their figures diminished, leaving Alara alone, bathed in the soft afternoon light, a profound sense of serenity settling over her. The drive home was silent for Lyra and Silas, the gravity of their predicament pressing down on them with suffocating weight. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard dread, a visceral fear they had never known. They were truly on their own, adrift in a world they had never truly navigated. The calls from creditors intensified, a relentless barrage of demands. The mortgage company sent a formal notice of default, a stark, legal document that screamed of impending loss. The car leasing company sent a tow truck to Silas's apartment building, its mechanical arm reaching for his gleaming sports car, repossessing it in front of his horrified neighbors, shattering his carefully constructed image. Lyra's boutique, already struggling, couldn't cover its rent without Alara's monthly infusions, and the landlord began eviction proceedings, the dream of her vanity project dissolving into a harsh reality. Willow, mortified and furious, called Lyra daily, her voice a torrent of demands, explanations, and, most importantly, money. She demanded that her mother fix it, unaware of the vast chasm that had opened beneath their feet. The social circles Lyra and Silas had so carefully cultivated began to shift, to retract. Friends, who had once flocked to their expensive parties and admired their lavish lifestyles, began to distance themselves, sensing the financial tremor, the sudden lack of an endless supply of free entertainment. The carefully constructed facade of their lives was not just cracking, it was shattering into a million pieces. They had known nothing but dependence, and now, the rug had been pulled out from under them with brutal efficiency. The panic escalated into a deep, desperate fear of the unknown, of a life they had never prepared for, a life where they alone were responsible for their survival. Ilara, meanwhile, felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in decades, a profound sense of unburdening. The morning after the confrontation, she called her old friend, Margaret, a free-spirited artist she hadn't seen in years, their friendship having been subtly sidelined by Ilara's endless parental obligations. "Margaret," Ilara said, a genuine smile in her voice, a lightness she could hear herself, "remember all those trips we talked about, the ones we never took? The grand adventures we postponed indefinitely? How about Ilara finally books that cruise through the Norwegian fjords? The one with the lectures on Viking history and the gourmet dining?" Margaret, surprised and delighted, readily agreed, her own voice bubbling with excitement. Ilara, for the first time in memory, began to plan for herself, not for her children, not for their demands, but for her own quiet joy. She hired a landscape architect to redesign her garden, something she had always wanted but deemed too frivolous when Lyra or Silas had a new crisis requiring immediate financial attention. She enrolled in a pottery class, her hands finding a new kind of satisfaction in shaping clay, in molding something beautiful and tangible, a stark contrast to the endless, futile shaping of her children's lives. She spent afternoons reading, truly reading, losing herself in stories, without the nagging feeling that she should be checking bank accounts or responding to urgent, demanding texts. The large, silent house was no longer a cage of responsibility but a peaceful sanctuary, a haven of her own making. Months passed. The seasons changed, and with them, the lives of the Beaumont family. Ilara thrived. She spent her days pursuing her passions, gardening, painting, attending lectures on art history and philosophy, and meticulously planning her next adventure. Her laughter became more frequent, a genuine, unforced sound that had been absent for too long. Her eyes sparkled with a newfound vitality, reflecting an inner peace. She rediscovered old friendships and forged new ones, surrounding herself with people who valued her for who she was, not for what she could provide, people who engaged in genuine conversation and shared laughter. She traveled, truly traveled, savoring every moment, every new experience, no longer constrained by the financial demands or emotional drain of her children. She visited ancient ruins, explored bustling markets, marveled at natural wonders, each new vista expanding her soul. She donated generously to charities that genuinely helped those in need, feeling a profound satisfaction in seeing her wealth used for good, for tangible impact, not squandered on material excesses. She was, finally, truly free. The walking ATM had not only closed but had opened a new account, one where the deposits were moments of joy, acts of self-care, and genuine connection. Lyra and Silas, stripped of their safety net, were forced to confront the harsh realities of independent living, a world they had long avoided. Lyra lost her house and moved into a small, rented apartment, a stark contrast to her former mansion. She frantically searched for a real job, the boutique a distant, embarrassing memory. She now worked in retail, selling clothes to others, a bitter irony that sometimes brought a humorless chuckle to Ilara when she heard reports. Silas, after losing his car and apartment, moved back into his parents' old, much smaller, house that Ilara had kept as an investment property. He had to take a low-paying administrative job, his entrepreneurial dreams shattered, replaced by the mundane reality of bills and responsibilities. Willow, after a painful few weeks of uncertainty and anger, had to transfer to a less prestigious, public university, securing student loans and working part-time to cover her expenses. The luxury cars and designer clothes were gone, replaced by bus passes and budget-friendly outfits. They were no longer the pampered children of a wealthy matriarch, they were ordinary adults, learning, belatedly, the hard lessons of self-sufficiency, of delayed gratification, of earning their own way. They called Alara occasionally, their voices subdued, no longer demanding, sometimes offering a hesitant, almost unfamiliar, apology, a glimmer of recognition for what they had lost. Alara listened, but offered no financial aid, only measured advice on budgeting and job searching, on the realities of the world. The vault remained closed, a permanent monument to the boundaries she had finally erected. The story of Alara Beaumont serves as a powerful testament to the fact that genuine love and respect cannot be bought. For years, Alara poured her heart and fortune into her children, hoping to purchase their affection, their gratitude, their happiness. But true connection stems from a place far deeper than financial transactions. It is a reminder that while generosity is a virtue, enabling dependency and tolerating disrespect slowly erodes one's own spirit, diminishing the very person who gives so much. Ultimately, the most profound act of loyalty is often the one we show to ourselves. Alara's journey from heartbroken provider to liberated individual teaches us that sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for others, and for ourselves, is to set boundaries, close the vault, and allow everyone, including ourselves, to finally stand on their own 2 feet. This channel is filled with stories of incredible transformations, justice served, and powerful life lessons. If you were moved by Alara's journey and want to hear more tales of courage and resilience, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. We release new stories every week. And we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced similar ingratitude or disrespect from someone you've helped? Or what would you have done if you were in Alara's shoes? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.